Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, it's nice to see you again.
Yes, Abhinav and Natalia, congratulations. You guys made it to finals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well deserved, by the way. I got to watch or judge both of you. So, as I said, well deserved. All right, should we begin? I don't know if we're waiting for anyone else.
I'm
Um,
good to
okay.
go. Okay, if all judges are ready, I'm good to go. Okay. Um, this will be the 6-minute affirmative constructive. It'll just be reading case. Everyone good? Time starts on my first word. I affirm the resolution resolved. The development of artificial general intelligence is immoral. To clarify the round, I offer the following definitions. Artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is defined by Bergman 24 as machine learning in which AI can match or exceed the cognitive abilities of human beings across any task. It's the artificial replication of human intelligence in a machine, in contrast to current AI, whose intelligence is only in specialized domains. I value morality, defined by Collins as a system of principles and values concerning people's behavior, which is generally accepted by society. My value criterion is maximizing expected well being. Maximizing expected well being is the key to morality. Zile 24 writes that maximizing well being entails actions and decisions aimed at promoting the welfare of individuals and communities, providing a foundation for morality for ourselves and future generations. Contention 1: AI ruling class. Big tech companies control information and remove accountability. Miller 24 writes that companies' control of information and power have almost overtaken governments. These powers used to be the exclusive domain of the state, but are now seeping into private companies without checks and balances. As governments outsource functions to tech companies, they offload accountability. Development of AGI centralizes power. Net 24 writes that big tech is at the forefront of the AGI race. Organizations have substantial resources for advancing AGI. With services used by billions of people, they have access to unparalleled data that can seamlessly integrate AI tech into platforms, ensuring rapid deployment and scalability. Concentration of power raises ethical issues, leading to misuse and abuse. Dominance of a few corporations in AGI can result in monopolistic practices and skewed AI behaviors. Limited transparency about objectives makes it difficult for the public to hold them accountable. Control of AGI development is concentrated among a few tech corporations, leading to power centralization. Hakila 23 writes that an AI boom will concentrate big tech's power. An AI boom depends on resources only available to big tech companies. Big tech firms consolidate power through AI rather than democratize. The US is reluctant to regulate its tech sector. Concentration of AGI development within a small elite leads to disproportionate influence over societal decisions. Pethokoukis 24 elaborates that AGI control concentrates wealth, worsens inequality, and threatens democracy. Few companies dominate the AGI market and extend power across the economy, leading to excessive concentration of economic power among AGI developers. The impact is twofold. First, companies with large market power can harm the environment with few consequences. Brumfield et al. 22 writes that oil companies spent $200 million directly lobbying to block policies tackling climate change. Even when the environmental impact is clear, pushing back against corporations with market power is extremely difficult. This is especially concerning since AGI is a significant emitter of CO2. Shu24 writes that the carbon footprint of training a single LLM is 600,000 pounds of CO2. AGI corporations would be able to push back against policies regulating climate AGI emissions, speeding up climate change, resulting in societal consequences. Pamela 15 writes the impact of global warming would be felt most strongly in poorer countries. Mass deaths and famine, social collapse, and mass migration are possible. Shocks to the agricultural and biosphere dependent industries of developed countries could lead to global conflict and civilization collapse. Second, power centralization exacerbates poverty by reducing income. Brumfield et al. 22 writes that market market power leads workers forced to accept lower wages, while their earnings are paid to top-level executives. Several empirical studies have confirmed that increased market power has significantly lowered workers' incomes. Poverty has a litany of harms, as ODPHP 21 writes that impoverished people have an increased risk of mental illness, chronic disease, higher mortality, and lower life expectancy, and are more likely to experience generational cycles of poverty. Contention 2 is jobs. Right now, employment is on the rise, as Wiseman 25 confirms that U.S. job growth surged and unemployment fell last month. Employers added 256,000 jobs last month, and hiring grew at a solid pace. AGI would eliminate a large majority of jobs, causing income inequality to increase. Dupper in 24 writes that AGI could automate not only repetitive tasks, but also highly skilled jobs, pushing the population into long-term structural unemployment. In the end, economic inequalities will increase. That devastates the economy, as Landy 11 writes that income inequality causes deep recession and weak recoveries. Data found that when there is high income inequality, wages stagnate and there is less growth. These economic slumps would cause societal collapse. Pamela 15 writes that economic collapse is accompanied by social chaos, unrest, and breakdown of law and order. This could trigger a social collapse that could cause death and suffering. New economic systems would be necessary to avoid economic collapse. Ropek 24 writes that to make up for the fact that AI could destroy millions of jobs, America needs a new system that could financially support huge sections of the population. A universal basic income system seems necessary to alleviate this coming wave of automation. However, Trump's removal of AI protections prevents these systems from arising. Axelrod 25 writes that Trump has undone existing AI protections with little to replace them, which is primed to accelerate AI's development and deployment without critical guardrails to protect jobs. Contention 3 is bias. AGI is riddled with biases leading to unfair discriminatory outcomes. Sonko 24 writes that AGI risks bias. AGI exacerbates existing bias in underlying algorithms, leading to unfair outcomes in criminal justice, healthcare, and hiring. Biases to fairness, transparency, and accountability. Bias from AGI results in discrimination, which negatively impacts minorities and society as a whole. Bibby 21 et al. Confirmed that discriminatory practices reinforce social inequalities, threatening social cohesion. This translates into unfavorable positioning for minority groups in education, employment, satisfaction, and health. With that, I stand open for 3 minutes of cross.
All right, thank you very much. Just to clarify, it's 3 minutes of cross-examination, which will start on my first word. Okay. So what do you think? So humans can explain how they came to a decision, correct?
Correct.
And so AGI would be able to match, if not surpass, human cognitive abilities, correct?
That's what I said in my Bergman 24 definition.
Exactly. So would AGI be able to explain why it came to a decision?
Regardless of whether it can explain how it came to a decision, that's irrelevant to the points I made thus far. Even if it can explain its decision, it would still centralize power because the very development of AGI requires vast amount of resources that only big tech firms have access to.
Okay, so on your first contention about AI ruling class and how the big tech companies will centralize the power, you say that this is because the government is not able to regulate the development of AGI?
No, that wasn't the crux of the argument. The crux of the argument is that only big tech companies have the resources available to construct AGI. Regardless if the government has regulations, it doesn't matter whether they regulate its tech sector because it's the problem is with market power. Because they're the only ones with the access to resources to develop AGI, they have a concentration of market power. So the more we depend on AGI, the more that it's implemented, the more their power is centralized.
Okay, so why do they only have the resources and not other companies?
Even if another company had the resources to do it, the fact of the matter is the AGI industry would still have power concentrated towards it.
No, but I'm confused. So you said that they only have the resources, but is there anything stopping the other companies from also gaining these resources? Do you have any evidence showing that?
Like I told you with Net24, since AGI requires a vast amount of resources and large companies have market factors such as economies of scale that allow them to better access these resources, they have primary access and easier access to gain these resources. Even if another company got access to these resources, it doesn't change the market power that the AGI industry would have.
Okay, so If there is decentralization and people are able to access benefits, let's say that, for instance, with AGI, we would need human supervision. Wouldn't that create some more jobs for the humans?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So, like, if we need human supervision for AGI, which is, I think, is a likely argument on your side, wouldn't we need humans to also be employed to make sure that they provide that proper human supervision?
I never argued that we would need human supervision. Even if we did have human supervision, that wouldn't outweigh the vast amount of jobs that AGI would replace. Because the fact of the matter is, like I tell you with Dupper in 24, AGI can replace not only repetitive tasks, but also highly skilled jobs. Even if we assume that AGI would need to be supervised, that doesn't offset the vast amount of jobs that it would eliminate.
Okay, thank you. And I believe that is time. So, since we have 5 minutes of prep time, I would like to use 2 minutes starting now. All right, I believe that is time. Is my
Yes.
opponent ready? Are my judges ready?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just wait on the other judges to confirm. Okay, well then my 7 minute for negative rebuttal plus constructive plus rebuttal will begin on my first word. I negate resolved. The development of artificial general intelligence is immoral. I offer the following definitions. Resolved. This resolution does not require action or policy implementation. Development. Artificial general intelligence itself becoming more advanced. Artificial general intelligence, also known as AGI, a type of artificial intelligence AI that matches or surpasses human cognitive capabilities across a wide range of cognitive tasks and has the ability to self-teach. These thinking tasks do not consider societal values or morals. Unlike artificial narrow intelligence, ANI, which exists today, AGI would strive to perform many tasks that it was not specifically programmed for, and it would most likely be built off of current AI research. Immoral, consciously not conforming to a set of predetermined standards of right and wrong. It is different from amoral, which is the state of completely lacking morals, therefore being incapable of consciously making moral or immoral decisions. Neg wins this debate if it can be established that AGI is not immoral, even if it is amoral, as these are two separate terms. To frame my case, I offer the value of justice, which is what is deserved and the quality of being fair. To measure my value, I offer the value criterion of consequentialism, which is a philosophical perspective and which argues that an act or rule is acceptable or moral because of the outcomes incurred by that act or rule. Contention 1, AGI is not immoral because it is amoral. In 2021, philosopher Dr. Churchland at the University of California, San Diego claimed that ethics are intertwined with emotion, but a machine lacks emotion and neutral networks don't feel anything. Additionally, Additionally, any attempt to place guidelines on AGI's behavior limits it in a way that humans are not limited. That by definition makes it narrow, meaning that true AGI cannot have any constraints, including moral ones. Because of this, AGI would lack morals, therefore making it amoral. Contention 2, AGI would have the ability to be more impartial than humans. With proper human supervision, AGI can benefit many experts in different fields, such as judges in a court of law. According to a paper published by Harvard University in 2023, algorithms could improve the fairness of judgments because AI judges strictly follow precedents, prevent personal biases and preferences of individual judges, and discover statistical representations of variations of fact patterns and legal factors. Additionally, AGI would be able to retrieve large amounts of data, which would allow a judge to avoid accessing one-sided information, thus allowing the judge to be more impartial. Moreover, the introduction of AGI would help judges navigate the deep and complex web of statutes, conventions, and regulations that cover our jurisdictions. Studies show that other influences on judicial decisions include hunger, the weather, the performance of local sports teams, and a defendant's mugshot. In 2022, researcher David Mashallah reported, as behavioral scientists have long noted, subject matter experts tend to overvalue their personal experiences, overvalue their personal gut feel, and have limited knowledge of statistics and probability. On the other hand, by nature, AGI would not possess these qualities as it is incapable of personal experiences or possessing a personal gut feel. Instead, AGI would have access to an abundance of information which it would properly evaluate. Hence, AGI would naturally be less biased than humans. Under consequentialism, the outcome would be a less biased judicial system which upholds justice, as citizens deserve such impartiality no matter the situation. Contention 3, AGI would improve healthcare globally. In 2024, many health experts, including Joe Allen and Caroline Buckey, agreed that even though the COVID-19 pandemic recently occurred, another future pandemic is inevitable. Because of this, in 2024, Jenna Kurzweil wrote, researchers at the Beckman Institute developed an AI model that can accurately identify tumors and diseases in medical images. The tool draws a map to explain each diagnosis, helping doctors follow its line of reasoning, check for accuracy, and explain the results to patients. This AI model is not meant to replace doctors as it serves as a tool for professionals. Similarly, in 2024, Dr. Katharina Schmally developed a similar predictive algorithm. The diagnostic delay is roughly 10 to 15 years for these diseases because physicians don't see them very often, said Dr. Schmally. Women unfortunately get dismissed when they go to the emergency department over and over again for these complaints because it looks like it's menstrual pain, but actually it could be a true liver disease. AGI would be able to advance these breakthroughs in the medical field, which would lead to saving many lives rather than waiting for at least a decade. These breakthroughs would be advanced with AGI as it would have access to more data than current ANI models. If certain diseases can be caught and eradicated early on, then we lower the chance of another pandemic. By measuring the morality of this subject, consequentialism shows that the impact of the lack of development of AGI would result in letting thousands of people die from preventable and treatable diseases. By doing so, justice would be eroded, as innocent people deserve a proper chance to live and receive advanced healthcare. Conclusion. Based on an evaluation through a consequentialist perspective, an affirmative ballot is a vote for biased judgment and the continuation of preventable deaths. However, a negative ballot is a vote for defending justice. Now, moving on to my opponent's case, my opponent offers the value of morality. However, this is a super value that is meant to be measured with another value. Therefore, if he uses a value criterion of maximizing expected well-being, that makes it his value, leaving him with no value criterion. Therefore, we do not know when his value has been achieved. This is why you should prefer my framework of justice and consequentialism. Now, my opponent's first contention is about the AI ruling class and that there's centralization of AGI development. However, the affirmative claims AGI centralizes power, but in reality, the lack of AGI guarantees that power remains with a few elites. AGI developed transparently and with guardrails can break existing monopolies, empower individuals, and democratize access to intelligence itself. Arguing that against AGI is like arguing against electricity because only rich cities get it first. The solution to inequality isn't stopping progress, it's ensuring access. The moral focus should be on equitable deployment and open governance, not halting development altogether. Now, my opponent also talks about the climate change. However, according to an article from the scientific journal Energy, AI improves enterprise green technology innovation efficiency, which is a crucial driver of low carbon energy transformation, which leads to the transition of cleaner energy sources and technology. Now, moving on to my opponent's second rebuttal of jobs and how we need how the there will be mass unemployment. According to researcher Fabio Duarte, 75% of employers globally are not able to fill job vacancies. There is a huge labor shortage. Therefore, AGI would be able to mitigate this without mass unemployment. Now, my opponent's third contention is about bias in the healthcare and criminal justice, but I would like to point out that current ANI is already less biased than humans, and AGI will be able to advance this because it has access to more data, not just one-sided information, which humans are typically have access to. Therefore, it would minimize bias in the long run. And this is why I urge a negative ballot, and I stand ready for 3 minutes cross.
Everyone good for cross?
Yes.
All right. Time will start on my first question. Let's start off with your first contention, which talks about amoral versus immoral. How is it moral to develop something that is amoral?
Okay, so let's think about it this way. Since it is amoral, it is morally neutral. According to AI expert Anna Carla Costa, we say AI is a machine that does not have any motivation itself, and the motivation depends on the user. This means that since AGI is morally neutral, immoral actions are on the part of the user, not the AGI. So therefore, immoral actions done by humans can be mitigated with frameworks for the use of AGI.
You said amoral means something that lacks moral constraints and lacks morals, correct?
I said it's something that lacks morals. So
Okay,
it's
so you're
not
saying
able
it's
to.
so you're saying it's moral to develop something that lacks morals, correct?
So it to lack morals doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. It just means that it doesn't have the opportunity. It's not able to compute these morals. So for instance, if we look at the example of AGI versus, let's say, a dog, let's say someone doesn't want a dog to walk on their lawn, but the dog does that anyway because it doesn't know that it is immoral to do so. So therefore, if the dog performs this action, first, there's not that much harm, and second, you wouldn't say that it is immoral because the dog just doesn't know any better.
We'll move on to your second contention of impartiality. Do current data sets have biases in them?
They have very limited bias, and I would like to point out that not all bias is bad in a moral situation. For instance, if one is presented the option to cheat on a test, that person should be biased towards not cheating.
So if we talk about your specific example of helping judges in the courtroom system, would you say that racial profiling would be part of current data sets?
I don't think racial profiling should be necessarily considered when delivering a sentence.
That wasn't my question. Does racial profiling exist in current data sets? Is there an overrepresentation of colored people in the criminal justice system?
That is not the bulk of my argument.
That
My
regardless,
my
yeah,
other.
I can you answer the question, please?
Okay, so the thing is, if we're looking at AGI, well, so current ANI models, they are already show that they are less biased than humans. And for instance, there are many biological bias factors, not just factors based on racial bias. So for instance, hunger, the weather, the performance of local
Okay,
sports teams, and a defendant's mugshot. And
we'll
this
move
is
on. Okay. Okay, I think that's fine. We'll move on to your third contention of healthcare. Is AGI more effective than current physicians?
Well, we couldn't say that, for instance, AGI is more effective right now because AGI doesn't exist.
Would you say it
I would say that we need to use AGI as a tool for physicians. I
would
don't
you
think
say it would be more effective?
it would be effective. It would make physicians more effective in their jobs as a
Okay.
tool.
I'll take running prep and I'll tell you how much time I use. Time starts now. Okay, that was 3 minutes, 25 seconds of prep. Okay.
So your rebuttal's 4 minutes?
Yeah, this will be the 4-minute affirmative rebuttal. Order will be framework, my case, their case. All my judges good? Time begins on my first word. Let's begin on her value of justice. Prefer morality because the topic questions the morality of developing AGI. Let's move on to my first contention of AI ruling class. Her first response here is that AGI developed transparently can prevent this from happening. But the fact of the matter is AGI isn't being developed transparently. That's what Net24 and Aquila23 tell you. She compares this to electricity, saying that if electricity isn't centralized, then AGI won't be either. However, this is simply a false equivalency because the fact of the matter is AGI requires much more resources than electricity requires to be developed. Then she responds to my environmental impact, saying that AGI will improve green technology, but doesn't quantify if AGI will be able to offset its own emissions. Oliver 24 tells us that AGI will increase emissions by 80%. She can't tell us if this green technology will be able to offset that. Finally, she never responded to my impact of poverty, so flow that through. Moving on to my second contention of jobs. Her sole response was that there's a labor shortage and it can fill the vacancies. However, she can't guarantee if AGI will only be used to fill those vacancies. As Dupper 24 tells us, AGI will be able to replace not only repetitive jobs, but also highly skilled jobs. Not only will AGI be filling these vacancies, but it'll also be putting a large other people who already have jobs into unemployment, causing more poverty. On my third contention of biases, she says current AI is less biased than humans. However, remember, AGI will be built off of current AI systems. That she concedes in her definition. Therefore, as Sanko24 tells us, AGI will simply exacerbate these biases. Finally, remember, AGI will be used in more industries than ANI. Remember, we are weighing this debate off of justice and morality. It is not moral to put more biases into industries where it would be avoided. It is not moral to shove other biases into those places. Moving on to her side of the flow. Let's start off with her first contention of amoral versus immoral. Two responses here. First, we are debating the development of AGI, not its implications after implementation. The development of AGI is inherently immoral because it centralizes power. Second, it is not moral to develop something that is amoral. It is not moral to develop something that lacks morals. Moving on to our second contention of impartiality. Two responses here. First, she concedes that AGI would be built off of current ANI, and she also concedes that current ANI is biased. Remember my Sanko24 card, which tells you that AGI would simply exacerbate these biases. Second, she says that AGI would have large access to data, specifically in the legal system. However, remember, this large amounts of data simply overrepresents colored people in our nation's history. The fact of the matter is, in our nation's history and so many other nations, colored people have been historically marginalized, especially in the criminal court system. This goes conceded in cross-examination. The fact that AGI would have access to data not only in the modern world, but also data from our nation, from history, increases these biases since they would have more incentive, since they were more likely to racially profile colored people. Moving on to our final contention of healthcare. First, AGI would only be good if it is more effective than healthcare clinicians. She concedes this in her definition, claiming that AGI would be able to surpass cognitive abilities. Therefore, it would be able to replace these jobs. She says that AGI is not meant to replace jobs. However, this is simply ANI. ANI won't replace jobs because it is narrow intelligence. However, since AGI can surpass their abilities, it will replace these jobs, and there are no economic systems to cover for it once they are replaced. Secondly, remember, when we use AGI more and more, we have an overdependence of it. This simply centralizes power more and more because we depend on these big tech corporations for their technology. That leads to more poverty, which goes completely uncontested in her rebuttal. Finally, this AGI, it is biased. Sanko24 tells us that it exacerbates bias in these pre-existing algorithms. Although pre-existing algorithms are less biased than humans, AGI will exacerbate it. So wherever it's implemented, it'll increase biases. For those reasons, I rest my case.
I believe I have 3 minutes of prep time left, so I would like to use all of those 3 minutes starting now.
anything this time.
Okay, thank you. Is my opponent ready? Are my judges ready?
That's 6 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, then if my judges are ready, then my time will start on my first word. And as a quick off-time roadmap before my time starts, I will move on to what my opponent said in his rebuttal and addressing that, and then I will move on to crystallization, which is why you should vote for the negative. So my opponent says that we should prefer the value of morality because the topic has the word immoral in it, but that just shows that we need a specific lens through which to view morality. This is why I offer the value of justice, because this is a specific lens. And through a consequentialist perspective, we need to look at the potential consequences of developing the AGI. My opponent makes the argument that we're focusing on the development and not the implications of AGI, but if the consequences are good, then we would be able to decide that it would in fact be moral to develop AGI if we were to have these good consequences, which I outlined throughout my case. Now, my opponent says that AGI is not being developed transparently. It's not my job to say that it is. It is my job to prove that it would be moral to develop it transparently. Now, my opponent says that I don't say that the AGI green energy transition will offset the CO2, but that is just inferred because if you are able to transition to green energy, then that by definition means that there will be less carbon emissions, therefore mitigating climate change. Now, my opponent says that I didn't respond to poverty, but I did by attacking his main argument about the centralization of AGI because he said that the poverty would stem from the centralization. But I will take my rebuttal a step further. Now, according to Matthew Barnett, in 2025, he said it is important to keep in mind that humans can still maintain a high quality of life after AGI, even if wages fall below subsistence level. This is because they could receive other sources of income to sustain themselves, such as dividends, government welfare, and charity. Therefore, we are not arguing that humans will starve to death after AGI. My opponent would rebut this by saying that it is just not possible given current government systems. However, it is not my job to say how it would actually apply because it is just my job to say that it would be moral because this is a Lincoln Douglas debate. Now, my opponent says that I cannot ensure that AGI will only fit the job vacancies. However, not all jobs require high skill level cognitively because we're looking at AGI as matching or surpassing human cognitive capabilities. However, not physical capabilities. There are so many jobs that require a physical skill that AGI by definition would not be able to actually fulfill. Therefore, there would still be many employment opportunities regardless. Now, my opponent says that AGI is built off of current ANI and it will exacerbate the bias. However, current ANI is already based off of current human data sets, and it has already shown to be less biased than humans, regardless of being built on these data sets. Therefore, with that same logic, if it can evolve to become an AGI, since it would be smarter, first, it would be able to actually evaluate that bias and detect it. Second, ANI is already functioning off of constrained data, which means it's limited to the data for the decisions. However, AGI will have much more data because it's not like we are injecting the data into the AGI because it would have access to all sorts of data, meaning that it wouldn't have access to one-sided data. Therefore, it would be less biased in that sense. Now, my opponent also talks about how it is immoral to develop something that is amoral. However, with the whole topic about amorality, that means that the AGI is morally neutral. And according to AI expert Anna Carla Costa, since AGI or AI is already neutral, it has no motivation, and any motivation comes from the user itself, which is uncontested by my opponent, which is why it should flow through. Again, if the motivation comes from the user, then there are ways to develop international frameworks, such as the EU AI Act, which is how people can use current AI today. And law is flexible, so there's no reason why we cannot develop a similar one for AGI. Now, my opponent again, going back to the bias argument, as I rebutted this also rebuts my opponent's argument about the overrepresentation of colored people in the data and racial profiling, because not all bias is based on racial bias. We need to take into account human biological factors that, for instance, they affect the sentencing. So, for instance, hunger and personal experiences, which is something that AGI would not be capable of, thus minimizing bias. Now, my opponent says that we would be able to replace doctors with AGI. However, we can collaborate with other humans, and if AGI would match human cognitive capabilities or even surpass them, then we can still collaborate with the AGI. With AGI, since humans are developing it, they have the choice to say whether they want to replace the doctors or not. However, this is a very unlikely scenario, and it is a very important to use this as a tool for collaboration if it would be able to stop the deaths of millions of people. Now, my opponent says that we would be depending on AGI and that this would lead to poverty. However, as I said before, this isn't dependence, this is collaboration. Now, moving on to my first voters issue, this is consequences, weighing the consequences. If we do not develop AGI, then this means letting thousands or even millions of people die from preventable diseases, and also allowing biased humans to continue to influence judicial decisions when we really have the option to use a less biased algorithm to aid humans. Now, my second voters issue is collaboration, because again, we are not depending on AGI. This would be a collaboration with AGI, which would be able to strengthen our current systems. This is a very new domain in which innovation would be propelled. And this is why I urge a negative ballot. Thank you.
I'll take the remaining 1 minute 35 of prep, starting now. Okay,
And that's
I
time.
believe that's time. This will be the 3-minute affirmative rebuttal. The order will just be voters, why you're voting Av. Are all my judges good? Time will start on my first word. Your first voter issue in today's debate is morality. Remember, we are debating the morality of developing AGI. The neg has come up here and said that AGI can help in healthcare and be impartial. However, regardless of potential uses of AGI, the development of AGI is inherently immoral for 3 key reasons. First, the development centralizes power. Their sole response is that if AGI is developed transparently, this won't happen. But the fact of the matter is, it's not being developed transparently. That's Net 24 and Hakila 23. This leads to environmental collapse and poverty, which went uncontested. They came up here and said that people can receive other sources of income, but the problem is these other systems of income aren't being developed alongside AGI, making it immoral. Second, AGI is being developed with the knowledge that it will replace jobs, but without systems in place to help the people who will go unemployed. She says that it can help in collaboration and serve as a tool. However, since AGI will be more effective than humans, since it has a higher cognitive ability, which is her own definition, companies have an incentive to replace humans for profit because AGI will be more effective. Third, AGI is being developed off of pre-existing algorithms that are biased, and this goes conceded. She says that ANI is less biased. However, you cannot quantify bias. We have already seen racial profiling by AI in police. This will be exacerbated, as Sonko 24 tells us. She says we are eliminating human biological factors such as hunger. However, I would argue that it's easier to fix a hungry person than an entire algorithm. Moving on to our second voter issue of justice. Remember, it is not just to develop something that once implemented will continue to marginalize minority groups. Second, it is not just to develop something that centralizes power, causing environmental collapse and poverty, which again went uncontested. And third, it is not just to develop something that eliminates jobs without a way to help the people who would be harmed. Therefore, I am winning off of both values. Moving on to our final voter issue, consequentialism. Her main impact in this round is saving people through an improved healthcare system. However, remember, her evidence looked at ANI, which proves that ANI is already sufficient enough. Finally, she is looking at the short term with turning a blind eye towards the long run. In the long run, more people end up in poverty through power centralization. And remember, the poverty impact went completely uncontested in her first rebuttal. This increases chronic disease, as ODPHP 21 confirms. Finally, if we are relying on AGI to solve the problem, remember, although AGI may not be completely biased, the fact that it has some biases means that it will continue to marginalize minority groups. So vote AF, because you prefer reality over fantasy. Thank you.
Thank you. Good debate. Thank you,
Good
judges.
debate. Thank you for judging.
It was nice to debate you again.
Yeah, same.
Excellent job. Are we required to disclose now? Okay. Anyone want to go first? I'm happy to go first, but
I think we have to wait for the panel decision to be in on tap
Yeah,
room.
I have to think about the debate a little bit. I need some time to decide. I don't know about
I
BK.
see. Okay, sounds good. I'll do the same and just let us know when you guys are ready.
I'm ready at any time. On my previous round, the judges just took a few minutes to put in their decision and then they gave their decision online.